Insecurities are one of the hardest things to deal with on a personal level, and it's made even worse by the presence of social media through the overstimulation of novelty. It's the gutted feeling of inadequacies, insignificance, and incompatibility to keep up or attain to the metrics, benchmarks, standards, and expectations of the world, of which, let's be honest, are significantly unrealistic and overly stigmatized or manufactured or manipulated. Life as we know it is absolutely unfair, and it has always been so. People are born with different circumstances. Some are fortunate and others are born without limbs or food on their table. This is just the reality of the world we live in, gentlemen. And as I've always said millions of times, we have to get used to that truthful narrative and accept that a lot of us are born with noticeable or significant deficiencies, shortcomings, and disabilities. We all desire to be accepted as social creatures. We all want to be acknowledged and be a significant part of a mutually connected community. However, the bitter reality of our nature as human beings is that we always instinctually want to avoid or exterminate the minority, crippled, lonesome, and the unfortunate, because they run the risk of jeopardizing the state of our welfare and survival. Like if you are part of a community where protection, resources, fellowships, and reproduction are strongly engraved or established, why would you run the risk of compromising your own state of well-being by leaving them to join a lone, crippled, and impoverished individual? Of course, your survival instinct will dominate your judgments by showcasing hesitancy, dismissal, and rejection, and it can even go as far as imposing discrimination, underestimation, ridicule, mockery, and even abuse if we feel bothered or threatened. In other words, those of us who are disadvantageous will not be primarily prioritized by others and will eventually get completely ignored by them. In the case of us men in the modern world, the issue of physical shortcomings, genetical defects, unfavorable history or background, and the state of incompetence and unreliability are the main sources of our insecurities. Short height, lack of hair, lack of resources, small genitals, limited knowledge, shortage of skills, an absence of family. These degrading sensation of pure insubstantiality, inconsiderableness, wretchedness, and worthlessness just eats away at us to the point where we desperately wish to be born a completely different person. Unfortunately, that wish is nothing but a complete and utter impossibility, and to make things worse, no matter how much we condemn the unreasonable and unrealistic standards of the world, they are already established and will always be imposed on us for as long as we live, and they're more likely to get even more amplified. So how can we overcome this? There is only one way. Compensation. There are insecurities that are completely out of your control and you can do nothing about, and insecurities that you have significant control over that you can eventually turn into a worthful or valuable advantages and supremacies. Cultivate those that you can control so remarkably until they overshadow those that you can't control. For example, you can't control how tall you are, nor can you control the length and girth of your dick, but you certainly can control your body composition and your level of knowledge and skills, which will eventually give you control over the level of resources that you can accumulate. If a man who is short, small, and bald, but is exceptionally built, able to fight, humorous, and wealthy, he wouldn't be primarily known as the short, small, and bald guy. Sure, they may get mentioned from time to time, but that's not what he will be acknowledged and remembered for, because those are not and won't be his valuable standout qualities that people are looking for and will be paying more attention and consciousness to. Life is significantly competitive, and for all of us that are unfortunate and disadvantageous, we have no choice but to do more and work much harder in order to eventually become equal in significance to the others or even more significant than them.
It is harder for me to share and to stake my claim. I truly want to be your equal, but in order for me to do so, I have to do better than you. I have to make you forget that I'm a cripple.
Another thing that is worth mentioning for the insecurities that you can't control is with regards to the matter of attitude. The amount of attention and consideration people give to your deficiencies significantly depends on your own level of attention and consideration towards them. People will give a lot of shit about them only if you give a lot of shit about them. Demeanors are contagious, we all know that, and people can innately sense this through subtle social subcommunications like your body language, tone of voice, and level of eye contacts. So if you are internally deprecating and selling yourself short because of your insecurities, people will eventually develop that same attitude towards you. You must be the one who dictates the narrative of your own presentation towards other people, because people will ultimately judge your character based on the level of authority you have over yourself. Like I mentioned in last week's video, how you think about yourself will ultimately lead to how others think about you, because they radiate into plausibility and tangibility through your physical demonstrations. So control the narrative of your deficiencies and twist them into a positive demeanor. The best way is to turn them into humor, and again, I've mentioned in last week's video of why humorous people are so attractive. I'll give you an example to make things clearer to you gentlemen. One of me mates have unusually long and lanky legs. They're so anatomically disproportionate in comparison to his torso that even how heavy he squats doesn't significantly impact their size. We occasionally poke fun on his skinny legs, as all of us men would do in our friendships, and if he was so insecure of them, he would have said things like, "Yeah man, it sucks bro, I wish I was born a different person," in an extremely depressing manner, and maybe further escalates his deprecation by endlessly explicating his insecurities. Instead, he said these words: "Dudes, I deeply apologize that I caused severe discomfort within your eye for aesthetics, because fortunately my families were direct descendants of African giraffes that all of us had to get custom-made pants because no available size pants would fit us all without exposing our naked ankles." Obviously, he hasn't got the best sense of humor in the world, but he exaggerates the narrative of his deficiencies to the point of unreasonableness, and he puts them in a positive limelight with a definitive tone, inevitably taking control and dictating the narrative for all of us that is in the room with him, which makes us develop an attitude towards his deficiencies the way he did. And again, we all know that positivity and resolute is contagious or infectious. So cultivate those insecurities that you can control to turn them into valuable traits, and twist the narrative of those you can't into a positive narrative, so that people will subconsciously overlook your shortcomings in favor for your quality attributes and upbeat or absolute demeanor. And sure, there are people who will try to constantly prey and capitalize on your deficiencies no matter what. In that case, the best thing you could do is completely dismiss them, because predatory people will always try their best to get an emotional reaction from you to establish control, and pretty much they're doing that to divert attention away from their own insecurities. If you are massively insecure, there is absolutely no use in feeling sorry for yourselves hoping that someone will come and soothe your brows and eventually give you a blowjob, because again, the world doesn't care and will ignore all of you who are crippled. How often have you ever heard or seen a homeless, disabled beggar on the streets get picked up by wealthy individuals and eventually living the dream life, especially if you're a man? I'd say never. Depressing and unfair? Yes, but it is undoubtedly possible to eventually thrive if you are willing to do significantly more as a disadvantaged individual. In the end, as always, it is your own choice to make. Thank you for watching.